Vocab called this one of my classic presentations. It's actually not. I have a presentation called Muhammad on science, right? Because there I incorporate lots of hadiths, and you can actually, when you combine the Quran with the hadith, construct Muhammad's entire universe, like the universe according to Muhammad, and human reproduction according to Muhammad. This is start to finish. You can put it all together. And what's amazing is that Muhammad gets everything wrong that he could possibly get wrong. Right? There are certain things that Muhammad got right, like there is a sun, and there is a moon, and things like that. Other than that, anything he could possibly get wrong, anything that a 7-year-old in Arabia could have gotten wrong about the universe, Muhammad gets it wrong. And that's why it makes it so strange that even if we just focus on the Quran, that Muslims use this as their most popular argument for why the Quran is the Word of God. How do you know that the Quran is the Word of God? Because of the amazing scientific insights in the Quran. Things that could have been known by a man in 7th century Arabia. Things that are only being verified today by scientists, and yet they were all right there in the Quran. This fount of science. That's why everyone who wants to learn science goes to Saudi Arabia. Now, I want to point out, because this is relevant in a variety of ways, an argument like this can only flourish in an atmosphere of ignorance. As many claims about Islam in general, they can only flourish in an atmosphere of ignorance. In other words, if you have an atmosphere where people don't know anything about Islam, a Muslim preacher can come in and say pretty much anything he wants to say. You believe in women's rights? Muhammad was the greatest feminist of all time. Really? Wow, he was way ahead of his time. I need to convert to that. You believe in science? The Quran is a fount of science learning, centuries ahead of its time. No matter what it is you like, Islam turns out to be the source of the thing you like. And that only works until you've got people who actually know what the Muslim sources say. And then you say, Muhammad was a tremendous feminist. If 8 hands go up and start quoting verses, that's when those arguments no longer work. And so, to respond to this claim, the claim that the main evidence for Islam is its amazing scientific insights, we just have to start looking at what the Quran actually says. And so we're going to look at a few passages. We're actually going to start with this one. Now, I understand that on this projector, I'm getting a little bit of a shadow at the bottom. It's no problem. I'm going to read everything here. So, the octopus. The octopus uses its tentacles both as feet and as hands. It draws in food with the 2 that are placed over its mouth. And the last of its tentacles, which is very pointed, and the only one of them which is whitish and bifurcated at the tip, it uncoils towards the rachis. The rachis is the smooth surface on the opposite side from the suckers. This it uses for copulation. In front of the sac and above the tentacles, it has a hollow tube by which it discharges the seawater, which gets into the sac whenever it takes anything in with its mouth. It moves this tube to right and to left, and it discharges milt through it. It swims obliquely in the direction of the so-called head, stretching out its feet, and when it swims in this way, it can see forwards, since its eyes are on top, and has its mouth at the rear. As long as the animal is alive, its head is hard, and as it were inflated, it grasps and retains things with the underside of its tentacles, and the membrane between its feet is fully extended. It gets on to the sand. If it gets onto the sand, it can no longer retain its hold. Now, this is actually entirely correct. Fortunately, Muhammad never said this. It was actually Aristotle, 1,000 years before Muhammad. And I bring this up because, one, I don't know how you could have possibly figured this out. Right? I understand, a research professor in a lab with octopi in a tank, studying them, could figure this out. I have no idea how someone 1,000 years before the time of Muhammad could figure this out. But Aristotle got everything right here. Now, what does that have to do with whether Aristotle is a prophet? Got a bunch of stuff right. Some amazing stuff right. Got more things right than Muhammad ever got right. Would any Muslim in the world say, therefore, this man must be a prophet? And the answer is obviously not. This wouldn't even count as a slight amount of evidence in favor of Aristotle being a prophet, according to Muslims. And you can see that there is a tremendous degree of inconsistency when you're dealing with Muslim arguments. If you're dealing with anything Muhammad said, suddenly it's amazing clear proof that he's a prophet. You can show much greater proof for anyone else in history. Does that mean this guy's a prophet? No evidence whatsoever. And you'll find this always as an assumption. Anything counts as full proof of Islam. Nothing counts as full proof for anything else. But let's compare Muhammad's scientific insights and just the Quran. I think we quote I quote a couple of passages just to show that we're interpreting the Quran correctly when it says something. But other than that, we're just sticking with the Quran here. I wanted to point out that there are some some areas where it doesn't matter what the evidence shows, Muhammad's wrong. Doesn't matter what the evidence is, Muhammad has to be wrong. And this is one example. And then we'll go into some of the details about the universe according to Allah. Chapter 2, verse 29 of the Quran. Watch the order of events here. He it is who created for you all that is on the earth. Then he turned to heaven and fashioned it into 7 heavens, and he is knower of all things. So, you've got the heavens and the earth. And there are basically only 3 ways this could happen. Allah could create the earth first, then the heavens, or the heavens first, then the earth, or create them both at exactly the same time. But here we have a sequence. Created all that is on earth, so not just the structure of earth, everything on earth was created. Then he turned to fashion the heavens, right? Fashioned it into 7 heavens, right? You got the order there, right? Earth, everything on it, done job. Then Allah turns to fashion the heavens. Okay, we got that down. Chapter 79, verse 27 to 33. Are you more difficult to create, or the heaven that he has built? He raised high its canopy and fashioned it, darkened its night, and brought forth its day. And after that, he spread out the earth. Did you catch that? And after that, he spread out the earth. From it, notice this is after the heavens are fashioned, and after that he spread out the earth. From it he brought forth its water and its pastures, and the mountains he set firm as sustenance for you and for your flocks. So when does Allah do everything with the earth? Like after the heavens, right? After the heavens are fashioned. What was that one right before it? Hang on. He it is who created for you all that is on the earth. All that is on the earth, so the pastures and the water and everything else. Then he turned to the heaven, fashioned the heavens. See a problem here? So notice, it doesn't matter what actually happens. One of these verses is wrong. One of these verses has to be wrong. So you've got situations like that where it doesn't matter what the evidence actually turns out to be, the Quran's going to be wrong here. More on those heavens. Because remember, right before here, he fashioned it into 7 heavens. Fashioned it into 7 heavens. But it's not just 7 heavens, there are 7 earths as well. Chapter 65, verse 12. Allah is he who created 7 heavens, and of the earth the like of them. So the same number of earths. There are 7 earths. And just to show that that is actually what this is saying, we have from Muhammad in Jamiyat Tirmidhi. Then Muhammad said, do you know what is under you? So, what's beneath you? They said, Allah and his messenger know better. He said, indeed, it is the earth. Wow. Notice, he got that one right. He got that part right. It is the earth. So, amazing science. That's the closest thing we have to an amazing scientific insight from Muhammad here. Then he said, do you know what is under that? Now, here's where we get to actually test Muhammad. Because no, we don't know what's under that. We do now, but they certainly didn't. So now we have a chance for an amazing scientific insight. Do you know what is under that? They said, Allah and his messenger know better. He said, verily, below it is another earth, between the 2 of which is a distance of 500 years, until he enumerated 7 earths. Between every 2 earths is a distance of 500 years. So 500-year journey, whether this is talking to a walking journey or a camel journey or whatever, 500-year journey between each one of these 7 earths. Now, is this what they taught you in earth science or in astronomy or anything? Someone got something wrong here. All right, let's take a closer look. We start to find out the shape of all of these earths. All 7 of them. Check this out. So, chapter 20, verse 53, He who has made for you the earth like a carpet spread out, 71:19, and Allah has made the earth for you as a carpet spread out, 88:17 through 20. Do they never reflect on the camels and how they were created, the heaven, how it was raised on high, the mountains, how they were set down, the earth, how it was made flat? And Quran translations don't always translate it this way, but we have Muslim commentators who point out what this is actually saying. This is Tafsir Jalalain, one of the most popular Islamic commentaries in history. As for his words, sitahat, laid out flat, this, on a literal reading, suggests that the earth is flat, which is the opinion of most of the scholars of the revealed law, and not a sphere, as astronomers have it, even if this latter does not contradict any pillars of the law. So, notice what he's saying here. So this is an Islamic commentator saying the Quran scholars understand the shape of the earth. It's the astronomers who are getting things wrong here. And to be clear, it's not just our earth that is the flat one. Ibn Abbas comments on this. Allah it is who has created the 7 heavens, so he's commenting on that, and he adds this commentary, one above the other like a dome. And of the earth, the like thereof, 7 earths, but they are flat. So the actual state of the universe is you have 7 earths sort of stacked on top of each other like a stack of pancakes, except that there's a 500-year journey in between each one of them. Now, is that what you learned on the Discovery Channel? That's not what they taught you? That's interesting. Stupid Discovery Channel. Anyway, Allah it is who created 7 heavens. Let's go back to the first part of that. Allah it is who created 7 heavens. Notice he says one above the other like a dome. Think about this. What does that mean? Right? What does it mean to say that there are 7 heavens? Well, we know how Muhammad's own companions understood this, that there are structures that are like domes. And there are 7 of them. And so you can be sort of in one area or you can go into the next. And interestingly, they're actually solid objects that can fall on you. Check this out. Chapter 22, verse 65. Do you not see that Allah has made subservient to you whatever is in the earth and the ships running in the sea by his command? And he withholds the heaven from falling on the earth. Withholds the heaven from falling on the earth. That's an object. Heaven is an object that would fall on us if Allah weren't holding it up. So there's something there to hold up that would fall on us. He withholds the heaven from falling on the earth except with his permission. Most surely Allah is compassionate and merciful to men. He doesn't have to let the whole thing fall down. He could just let like a chunk of it fall on us. That's why we have chapter 34, verse 9. See they not what is before them and behind them of the sky and the earth? If we wished, we could cause the earth to swallow them up or cause a piece of the sky to fall upon them. So you've got these 7 domes, and Allah is actually holding these domes in place. Anyone taught that in science class? In other words, this should have been some of the things that were discovered, right? If the Quran contains all of these miraculous scientific insights that couldn't have been verified until centuries later, these are some of the things that should have been verified. Like, back in the day, we didn't know a lot about what the sky was. And there were Greek philosophers who proposed that the sky is actually a solid object. Heraclitus thought that the sun is not actually an object, it's a hole. It's a hole in the hard sky, right? The sky is a solid object, and there's a hole in it. And you're seeing light through this hole, and that's what the sun is. So we know the ancients actually, there were ancients who actually thought of the sky as solid objects. They didn't know. They didn't have enough knowledge to actually know about these things. And so later, we actually have the ability to test these things, and Muhammad's kind of getting everything wrong here. Let's keep going. The sun has an orbit along with the moon, and the sun and the moon can actually kind of chase each other. But let's look at this. Chapter 36, verses 38 to 40. And the sun runs its course for a period determined for it. Sun runs its course. That is the decree of him, the exalted in might, the all-knowing. And the moon we have measured for it mansions to traverse, till it returns like the old and withered lower part of a date stalk. It is not permitted to the sun to catch up to the moon, nor can the night outstrip the day. Each just swims along in its own orbit according to law. So the sun and the moon have an orbit, and they can kind of chase each other, but the sun can't catch up to the moon. Now, the only real way to make sense of this in the light of science would be to say that when it talks about the orbit of the sun, it's talking about like the galactic orbit of the sun, right? Namely, you've got the Milky Way, and the Milky Way is spinning. And so the sun does actually have one giant, massive orbit around the entire galaxy. So you could say, well, it does have an orbit. Well, it sounds like it's talking about the sun and the moon kind of chasing each other around the earth. But if a Muslim wants to interpret it that way, wants to say, now this is talking about a galactic orbit, that sort of orbit. Well, the problem is that that's not what the Quran says. It's not what Muhammad says about it. So we'll take a closer look here. Chapter 18. By the way, if you just wanted to learn one of these for discussion, I would learn this and maybe the hadith that goes along with it. Chapter 18, verses 83 to 86. They ask you about Dhul Qarnayn. Now, historically, this is understood to be Alexander the Great. That was his Arabic title. Today, you'll find many Muslims who say there's no way it refers to Alexander the Great. And the reason there is Alexander the Great is described as a devout Muslim. Quran. Dhul Qarnayn is a devout Muslim. We know Alexander the Great was as pagan as you could possibly be. You can't possibly be more pagan than Alexander the Great was. And he was that way right up until his death. So the idea that he's going around a devout Muslim is absolute nonsense. But there are Muslims who understand this now, and so they say this can't be referring to Alexander the Great, it has to be referring to someone else. Doesn't really matter because there's a problem here. Chapter 18, verses 83 to 86, they ask you about Dhul Qarnayn. So people are asking Muhammad, tell us about Dhul Qarnayn. Say, I will recite to you something of his story. Truly we established his power on earth, and we gave him the means to all things. So he followed a course until, when he reached the setting place of the sun. Did you know that there's a setting place of the sun? They didn't teach you that? Till he reached the setting place of the sun, he found it setting in a pool of murky water. Near it, he found a people. So there are people who live there. So, one, you can travel so far west, you can actually find the place where the sun sets. If you actually do it, if you make this journey, like Dhul Qarnayn did, you'll find a pool out there. The sun goes down into it, and there are people who live around there. There are people who live there. So, the sun, obviously, has to be massively smaller than the earth if it's setting in a pool on the earth. It can't be putting out anywhere near the energy that most of us would think, because it's not melting the earth as soon as it gets here. And again, there are people who live there. Now, if you're a Muslim and you want to maintain that the Quran is a scientific masterpiece, you have to explain this somehow. And so the standard response here is this is not saying that Dhul Qarnayn reached the setting place of the sun, even though it says when he reached the setting place of the sun. It's not really what it's saying. It's saying he reached some body of water, and then he saw the sunset. He saw the sunset, and as he was watching the sunset, it looked like the sun is going down into this body of water, even though it's just a kind of optical illusion. It's not really going into a body of water. It just appeared that way. So the response is, no, this is describing the way things appeared to Dhul Qarnayn. It's not saying that it's not saying that he reached the setting place of the sun. It's not saying that. It's saying that he reached some place where it looks like the sun is setting into a body of water. Now, what's the problem with that? Well, Muhammad also commented on this in a Sahih narration. That's as good as it gets in Islam. But Muhammad commented, he's not commenting on this verse, he's explaining where the sun sets to one of his companions. So Sunan Abu Dawud 4002, it was narrated that Abu Dar said, I was riding behind the Messenger of Allah while he was on a donkey, and the sun was setting. He said, do you know where this sun sets? I said, Allah and His Messenger know best. He said, it sets in a spring of water. Notice, dual carnane is not part of this story here. This isn't referring to something that dual carnane saw while he was on a journey. It's not even part of the story. This is Muhammad telling his companions where the sun sets. And Muhammad, who knows the Quran better than anyone, that's official Islamic doctrine. No one interprets the Quran better than Muhammad did. Muhammad obviously believed that the sun sets in a pool. So he's obviously interpreting Surah 18, verse 86, to be a description of what you actually find if you travel to where the sun sets. And this is just completely wrong in all kinds of ways. And last, we'll look at what stars are. Chapter 37, verses 6 to 10. We have indeed decked the lower heaven with beauty in the stars. So, remember the seven heavens? They're like domes. The lower heaven, it's the lowest one that contains all of the stars. So the other heavens are other things, but the stars are in this lowest heaven. This is important because sometimes Muslims will try to reconcile one passage, not realizing they're refuting another passage of the Quran. So when you talk about the seven heavens, they'll say, this talks about the Earth's atmosphere, seven different areas of the Earth's atmosphere. Okay, well the stars are all in the lowest one. The stars are all in the troposphere? That's what you believe? Because we should be melting right now, right? So no, if the stars are in the lowest heaven, then this obviously is the heaven that we are aware of obviously goes out to the stars, not talking about the Earth's atmosphere here. We have indeed decked the lower heaven with beauty in the stars, for beauty and for guard against all obstinate, rebellious, evil spirits. What are stars for? For guard against all obstinate, rebellious, evil spirits. How's that going to work? Well, it says, so that they should not strain their ears in the direction of the exalted assembly, but be cast away from every side, repulsed, for they are under a perpetual penalty, except such as snatch away something by stealth, and they are pursued by a flaming fire of piercing brightness. If you look at the background of these passages, there are a bunch of these in the Quran, by the way, to talk about what stars are. Muhammad would be lying out with his followers at night, and they would see a shooting star. And he would say, hey, you know what just happened there? Demon tried to sneak into heaven to hear Allah's plans so that they could work to counteract those plans. But Allah caught on to him, or sometimes the angels caught on that this demon was up there trying to listen to Allah's plans. So Allah, or an angel, grabbed a star, hurled it at the demon, and that's why you saw a shooting star. There are all kinds of problems with this. Shooting stars are not actual stars, right? A shooting star is a big rock, hits the Earth's atmosphere, gets real bright for a little while, but it's not an actual star. The author of the Quran believes that shooting stars are actual stars. So, the lower heaven with beauty in the stars, for beauty and for guard against all obstinate, rebellious spirits. That's what stars are for. One more shorter one, chapter 67, verse 5. And we have from of old adorned the lowest heaven with lamps, and we have made such lamps as missiles to drive away the evil ones, and have prepared for them the penalty of the blazing fire. So this is another good one, like chapter 18, verse 86. If you don't want to learn 30 or 40 verses of the Quran to look at problems with science, 1886. It's an easy one to remember. It sounds like a year, right? 1886, back in 1886. 67.5 here is another good one. Because it says the stars are missiles. And just to show you that this is how Muhammad's companions understood what the Quran is saying here, we have Sahih al-Bukhari, 3198. Abu Qatada, that's one of Muhammad's companions, mentioning Allah's saying, and indeed we have adorned the nearest heaven with lamps, we just read that, said, the creation of these stars is for three purposes, and they are, 1, as decoration of the nearest heaven, 2, as missiles to hit the devils, and 3, as signs to guide travelers. So if anybody tries to find a different interpretation, he is mistaken and just wastes his efforts and troubles himself with what is beyond his limited knowledge. Is that a good scientific mindset right there? Stars are missiles. If you try and look for any other explanation, you're trying to be greater than Allah. So stop. Just stop. Islam is a science stopper, ladies and gentlemen. Islam is a science stopper. Allah has already told you. Allah has already told you what the universe is like. And if you put it together with what Muhammad says in the hadiths, then you get the complete picture of the universe, and what you find is, at the bottom, you have this giant fish, and everything rests on the back of the 7 Earths rest on the back of this fish. And when that fish gets angry and agitated, that's when you get earthquakes, right? So you have this fish at the bottom of everything, then you got the 7 Earths, they're stacked up like pancakes, but with some space there. And then you have these 7 domes. You have these 7 domes that are stacked up, and Allah holds them up so that they don't fall on us. And then in the lowest heaven, you've got the stars, and you see shooting stars because Allah hurled one of these things at a demon. Notice, stars should come up missing. The nearby stars should come up missing after Allah hurls one of these things. Every time you see a shooting star, a star should come up missing. And you've got the sun setting in a muddy pool. What did Muhammad get right of anything we could possibly test him on? Apart from, again, there is a sun, there is a moon, there are stars. What did Muhammad get right? And as far as I can tell, the answer is absolutely nothing. So if Muslims are using this as their main evidence, I'd say they need a new argument. And just to be clear, I really wouldn't care that much if they weren't using this as their main evidence. In other words, I really wouldn't care about reconciling the Quran with science if it weren't so common to point to this as the amazing proof that Islam is true. So again, these kinds of arguments, and almost every argument you could think of that Muslims are using in the West to convert people to Islam, all of these arguments only work in an atmosphere of ignorance where people can't respond because they don't know what's in the sources. And so if you want to learn to respond to Muslim arguments, just learn what's in their sources and you'll never have a problem.